Alright, I think we are successfully going here. Okay, so I'm going to do the weekly download now. And basically, the weekly download is a fun series that I do every week where I teach a different thing, or I will make a different tutorial or a different pack or what have you. And I often will basically be checking out what my students are doing over the class of 808, and if more than one of them has the same problem, that usually means that I'm going to make a weekly download out of it. So today, this weekly download is going to be about leveling, right? So leveling is really, hey, what's up, Sean? I see you over on YouTube. Okay, so leveling is really, really important. It's in a lot of ways, you know, like if you look at it, it's basically 80% of mixing when you are, you know, getting your mix right. 80% of the time, leveling is the most important thing. And like you look at any big mixer on a mixing desk, what's the thing that's closest to the producer? It's the volume faders, right? But people don't really get that excited about setting the relative volume levels of things. It's just like, there's not like a leveling plug-in or whatever. And, you know, people like, most of the time when people are starting out, their biggest mistake is that everything's just at crazy volumes. Like it's not, the sounds aren't really, they don't make sense relative to each other. The kick's not loud enough, etc. And people are just like, why aren't my drums hitting right? Why isn't my sub bass hitting right? And they think that they need to add all this compression and EQ and stuff. But honestly, 90%, 80-90% of mixing is just getting the levels right. So I'm going to show you a little bit about leveling. We're going to level out this mix down. Actually, I think I'm going to go turn off the light behind me so I'm not backlit. But yeah, 80-90% of getting a mix right is leveling, okay? So the first thing that you want to do is make sure that you're not like peaking your track, okay? So I'm just going to take this pink noise, I'm going to put it down minus 6 dB, and then I'm going to put this up to 0. And, well, okay, so first of all, the first thing you want to do is get your kick hitting at here. I'll just loop a small portion of this. The first thing you want to do, kick is the loudest thing. Always, always, always. The kick is the loudest thing. And you want that kick to be hitting at, you know, whatever your maximum is. I like to do minus 6. A lot of people say you should do minus 12 because basically, like in the analog world, an analog circuit is not going to start coloring the sound much. Like it's not going to start distorting and coloring the sound until you cross minus 12. So a lot of plugins are designed to be like as neutral as possible at the minus 12 level, but in Ableton, realistically, it's not such a big deal, and I kind of like to see the fader a bit more. But basically, the first thing I'll do is I'll set my kick to minus 6, right? So I'm going to do that now. Actually, here, you know what? Let's do minus 12. I'll show you how to do minus 12 because that's, I guess, the proper way. So in Ableton, right, you have these meters here. This is the default view of the meters. It's like all midgety or it's all little person-y and not, you know, it's all small and you can't really see what the levels are, right? But in Ableton and in most other DAWs, you can expand your levels so you can see your levels better. Okay, so this, it represents the level of the fader, and then this up here is representing the peak level, right? And then you see how there's like a darker kind of green, darker green peak, and then a brighter green peak. Well, the brighter green peak is the RMS, and RMS is root mean square, and it's just basically a fancy way of saying the average level, okay? So I want to set this to minus 12. So if minus 5.5 is minus 11.9, if I go minus 5.4, oh, sorry, minus 5.6 rather, minus 5.6 dB, that should give me a peak around minus 12. There we go. Okay, so that is going to be the loudest sound in the whole song. Okay, so I'm going to put this to minus 12 too, just because we're gonna the pink noise will come in later. Okay, so now the next thing that you want, the next level you want to set is your sub, and you want the peak on your sub bass to be coming in typically around -6 to -4 in bass music versus your kick. So if your kick is at -12, -18 is going to be a really loud sub, and -16 is going to be pretty loud. So I'm going to put the sub here. So I'm going to slowly turn this up. Can maybe creep it up a little more. Because I want the bass to be pretty loud in this, but don't make it less than a 4 dB difference between your kick and your sub, unless you really don't want your kick to sound very loud, right? But your sub and your kick are like, those are the loudest two sounds, so everything should be relative to there. Now, if you're doing like an electro track or whatever, and your snare or clap is going to be on top of the kick, you want it to be a bit quieter. But if you're working in a genre like breakbeat or hip hop or drum and bass or dubstep, usually those genres, the snare is kind of like, that's the main steady thing in the rhythm, right? So you want that to basically be at approximately -12 as well. So I'm going to turn this up until I get a -12. Now if you go, see how I go -2.85 and it rounds it to 0.9? That's because Ableton is floating point. So you can actually enter as many decimal places as you want and be as precise as you want, without the without Ableton just rounds it off visually, but it's not actually rounding it off. Actually, I wonder if I make this wide, if it'll make the field wide. No, it doesn't. Okay, so I can say -2.75, I guess. Okay, cool. So now that's pretty much an ideal balance between your kick and snare and sub in like a breakbeat or a dubstep kind of track. And when you master everything, right, you're probably going to add additional compression that is going to make the sub louder relative to your kick and snare. So, you know, you can always use additional compression, especially multiband compression at the mastering stage to make that sub hit a little harder. But if you make your sub too loud, right, initially if your sub is too loud, then you can't like uncompress that when you're mastering, and your mix is going to be fucked. So it's better to err on the side of caution. I usually like to have 6 dB difference. In this case, I'm going to have a little less. Actually, here, I'll just put that to 0. Okay, so then the question arises, right? How do you level the rest of the sounds? Well, you typically want them to be like a little bit quieter versus the kick and the snare and the sub. But there's a really cool trick that I like to do for leveling the rest of the sounds, and this is the pink noise leveling trick, okay? So there's lots of different kinds of noise, different flavors of noise, if you will. And pink noise has a really nice kind of spectrum balance to it, right? So I'm going to solo the pink noise, and then I'm going to get my little spectrum plug-in here, and we're going to look at what the spectrum is on pink noise, and then I guess I'll do the same thing with white noise. But check out, like, you see this nice falling. Like, it's not too bright, you know. White noise is really bright. Like, if we get an operator out here. Operator is a really good synth that comes with Ableton. But if we get operator here and we go white noise, right? Let's make another spectrum plugin and then go on this white noise, and then you'll see white noise is pretty much even. Like, it's the same volume across all of the frequencies, which means that you have like a pretty aggressive high frequency content. Right, which is really good for doing sound design and for a lot of other things, but it's very like, if you listen to white noise on a big sound system, you're going to be like, oh god, my ears, it hurts, right? So pink noise is called pink noise because it's a little bit darker than white noise. And darker, you mean like up in the high frequencies. People often refer to the high frequencies as like bright or, you know, sharp or whatever, because they just kind of sound bright and sharp on your ears. So if you look at this pink noise, you can see it's got a pretty nice kind of, you know, what is this here? That's like minus 42 versus minus 18. So if that's like, I guess that's like minus 12 to minus 42. So that's, what is that? 6, 12, 18. It's like 24 dB by the time you get to 10K. So it's a nice gentle curve. And really, like, a lot of the time when people are mixing EDM, they kind of make shit too dark, right? Like, and it's too bass heavy. But actually, usually you want a little bit of like brightness in your mix to kind of for it to sound nice. So now check it out. If you take like, I'm gonna take like just some tracks here, some of my tracks, and just like look at the spectrum on these tracks, and you'll be able to see. Here, let's see. Where's let's just see. I'll go into some of my songs here. I'm trying not to put too many songs because sometimes it, and I typically like to use unreleased songs when I'm doing these lessons, because often YouTube and everything will, it will, you know, pick up on the fact that I've used copyrighted material and get me, you know, make me have to file a dispute. Okay, so now this is a track that I did. It's a remix that I did for Apache, which is one of my bigger tunes recently. I'm actually going to keep it quiet, but I'm just going to play it and like look at the frequency spectrum here. Right? So we got minus 6 here, and then what's this? This is at 10K, that's minus 42. So that's 6, 12, 24. Yeah, so it's a little bit darker than pink noise, my track, and that's a pretty bright mix down. So actually here, you know what, I'll so we're not actually listening to these drums and stuff. I'm just going to mute everything so you know you're not listening to that. So all I'm doing here is I'm taking these reference tracks. I'll call this ref. And I'm just seeing like how bright or dark they are, right? And you'll see, you know, when I'm playing this track, and this track sounds pretty good on a big sound system. You know, it's nice and loud. Oops. So I'll just let that go for a while so we get a nice print of the spectrum. Okay. So now if I let go of that, you'll see here, you know, by the time you get up to 10K, actually I guess that's like 8K, what is that? That's minus 31, and then at the sub and the kick are at minus 6. So yeah, it's about 24 dB of difference, right? So now let's go to our pink noise and look at pink noise again. So let that run and then wait. And you can see here up in 8 to 10K, it's about, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's about 24 dB of difference between the highs and the subs. So that's what they call a roll off, and that's like a nice, you know, that's just how much the frequencies are rolled off as you come to the highs. Because if you have really, really loud abrasive high frequencies, it sucks. Like, it hurts your ears on a big sound system. So generally, like, most EDM will sound good with a roll off about that. So I'm going to let's get some other people's tracks. Let's try like a Skrillex track or something, because his music is kind of famously bright and sharp. And if we're not going to actually listen to it, then I don't think I will get in trouble. Okay, yeah, here we are. Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites. Okay, so that's Skrillex is kind of, his music is a bit more aggressive in the high end than a lot of people's music, or at least especially his early music was. So let's do that. Whoa, look at that. That is a loud track. Like, look at it. Look at how loud that's been mastered. That thing's like a brick. Okay, so now if we take Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites and we do not listen to it, but we instead just look at what the frequency spectrum is doing. Let's go around here. Okay, so letting it play for a while. And let it go. And we can see that between about here and there, let's see, 6, 12, 24. It's actually a little bit, it's actually not that bright at all. It's even less bright. Let's check it out here. Do this again. Let it play for a while so we get a nice long sample of the frequency spectrum. Okay, and then we let it go. So we got minus 6 to, what is that? Yeah. So it's it's about the same. It's about the same. It's like not very different from most mixdowns. And you'll find most EDM mixes are kind of standardized to roughly about the same frequency spectrum as pink noise. So this is where the pink noise leveling trick comes in. Okay. Now we could do this with other tracks, but it would just show that your typical EDM track is like that, with the spectrum being, kind of similar to pink noise. Okay, so now what that means, right, is if you set the pink noise to the maximum level of that you're mixing to. In this case, we're mixing to -12, right? You should be able to just hear the next channel against the pink noise. So let's go here and we'll put our kick in, and you should be able to just hear. Now this is going to be like a burst of noise, so if you're listening really loud, maybe turn your speakers down. I'm not putting any mastering stuff on, so it shouldn't be too loud. But basically listen for the kick against the pink noise, and you should be able to just hear the kick against the pink noise. Okay, so let's try our snare. Actually, I'm going to put the pink noise at -6 instead. Because I like to have the kick, because this balance, like the kick sub snare balance, is more in the low end, and I like to set that before I do the pink noise trick. Okay, so I want to make it so I can just hear the kick against the pink noise. So I'm going to mix the pink up. Peter, you asked where do you get pink noise? You can just Google pink noise and someone will have it download. A lot of synthesizers have pink noise built in. But yeah, mix this. Yeah, I can like just barely make. So I can just barely make that out against the pink noise. Let's try this out. Yeah. Okay. So. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the rest of these channels up one at a time against the pink noise and level my track like that. Okay, that's that one. That's like some hi-hats and stuff. Here, actually, I'll go here so I can see what I'm doing, because some of these channels are a little more intermittent than others. Okay, so let's do this percussion channel. So you see, because this percussion channel is much brighter, right? That's much brighter than this. So that's because that's much brighter, it's actually quieter. Like you can see the dBu meter, I've set it quieter, right? Because I'm measuring it against the pink noise. And it stops you from making your track like too bright, which is really nice, and it stops you from making your mix too aggressive. Okay, so this mid basses. Where's our mid basses? Okay, there's a mid bass. Okay, let's try this melody channel. I think the melody bits only happen here. You can also sometimes do this in headphones. Probably around there. Okay, I had some heavy metal parts. I'm like, this is me playing my girl's guitar. You want to be able to just make them out. You know, you want to be able to just make them out. Okay, and then after that, what is after the heavy metal one is the risers. Okay, that's the risers. These taiko sounds. Yeah, that's about right. Okay, now there's this channel of little fills. Kind of bright. Okay. And then here's this vocal. Okay, cool. So that's all the channels. So now watch this. When I remove the pink noise, and then I put all these channels that I've individually leveled against the pink noise, they're going to sum to a balanced mix. And okay, so basically the pink noise, like the level of the kick, the sub, and the snare, I set before. Here, I'll turn all the other tracks off for a second. The level of the kick, sub, and snare I did without the pink noise. I wanted the kick to be hitting at -12. I wanted the sub to be between 4 and 6 dB quieter, so 18, maybe a little above, and I wanted the snare to be right about -12 too. So I set these very precisely and visually to get this. Where are we at? Here, I'll go back up here. Okay, so now the rest of these sounds, they've been set relative to each other. So if I select all of them, right? Or I even you can even group them all, and this will be everything else. So they're all going to be balanced against each other because I balanced them all against the pink noise. So now I can bring this fader up and down relative to the kick, snare, and that, and make it. Oh yeah, here, let's it would help if I turn them on, wouldn't it? Fills could come up a little. Oops. Oops, do that. Deselect. Oh no, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, and you can see the sum of everything else is not really as loud as the kick and snare, but you can kind of take the whole balance of everything else down a little bit if you feel like the drums are too quiet. And then later when you master it, right here, I'll just put I'll put a limiter on here so you can hear what the mix sounds like when it all comes out in the wash. Do that, and then put a utility. This is going to be a bit louder than it was, so just watch out. So the pink noise gives you a really good balance of everything else to register against it, because pink noise contains all of the frequencies, right? It kind of doesn't really matter what's happening in the sound if you get it to be balanced against the pink noise, so you can just make it out against the pink noise. You're going to get the relative volumes of the sounds right. And it's just so important. Like so much of mixing is picking sounds that just sound different enough from each other that they're going to come apart in the mix and that they're going to all sound like really, really distinct, right? And then just setting the volumes right. Now, the one thing, because like you don't need to know EQ, you don't need to know compression to do that. You just need to be able to pick sounds that are a diverse set of sounds and get the volumes relative to each other. But one thing you should really do is basically put a high pass and a low pass on pretty much all your channels. And this is what's called the Abbey Road EQ technique. And usually you'll have like a high pass so that you don't have any mud in your subs. This is especially important on reverbs. And then a low pass, because usually you don't want things to be like super bright up in the top end unless it's like intentional. But usually you'll have an EQ that looks something like that. I like to have like a kind of gentle roll off so that it's just not too aggressive, because the sounds can just start sounding a little funny if you put too drastic an EQ on them. But yeah, so beyond just that little bit of high pass and low pass, you don't really need too much EQ on everything. You just need to balance them against pink noise and get the kick, the snare, and the sub to be balanced against each other. So the kick's your loudest sound, right? And the snare in breakbeat related music like hip hop or dubstep or what have you, the snare is usually at about the same volume as the kick, right? And then your sub is between 4 and 6 dB quieter, usually 6 to be on the safe side. And then basically set the relative volumes of all the other sounds, check them against pink noise as a reference. So here, I'll put the pink noise here. So these three, I'm going to make them white so you can see. And then all the rest of these ones, I'm going to make them pink so you can see that they're all relative to the pink noise, okay? Right, so all these other channels are relative to the pink noise. Okay, so if you either select them all at once and turn them up and down like that, like you see how it moves all the faders at once and it keeps their relationships. Right, so you can either select them all at once or put them in a group if your software supports grouping, and then just adjust the volume of the group in case you're finding that the drums are the drums are not loud enough, because your drums and subs need to be louder than all the other sounds, okay? So if you find that your drums and sounds aren't loud enough, sometimes it's nice to have a group with all of your stems and then just back it off a little bit, because like you don't make your mix loud by turning everything up, you make your mix loud by turning everything else down and then compressing it at the end in the mastering stage. And then it is often nice to have like a little kind of like just mix into a limiter or something so you can see what it sounds like when you start to compress it. So and then your limiter, you don't really, like, no mastering engineer is going to put like 12 dB of limiting on your track. You don't want to see that going down more than 6 dB. So I'll do it like you can push that pretty hard without it distorting, because the kicks and the snares are like really punching through the mix. There's a lot of dynamic range between the kicks and the snares and the other tracks. So I have a few other ones about mixing, but the pink noise reference technique is a really good way, especially when you've been listening to the mix like again and again and again and again until you're like going insane and you just can't hear the tracks anymore. Take them all down and balance them against the pink noise, and use that to just get the relative balance of all the sounds that are not the kick, the snare, and the sub. The kick, the snare, and the sub, you can do those like mathematically, like visually, just by, setting the levels. And then everything else, the relative balance of everything else, if you do it with pink noise, then you'll be able to kind of get, because like as I showed you before, we went and analyzed a bunch of EDM tracks. Pink noise kind of emulates the typical roll off of, just the way music sounds pleasant. Like even radio tracks are typically have a similar roll off where it's about between 24 and 36 dB quieter in the very, very highs than the very, very subs. And so that's basically how you do the pink noise trick to get all your leveling together. So if you're just starting out and you're trying to get a good mix, don't worry about compression. Don't worry about too much drastic EQ. Drastic EQ ruins your sounds, okay? It ruins your sounds to do too much EQ. There's other weekly downloads about EQ that I did recently. But this pink noise leveling trick, just get sounds that sound cool together, that are like real different from each other, and you know, that will help them sound separate in the mix. Like if every single sound is a saw wave lead, your mix is going to sound muddy because all the sounds are the same. Like if every single sound is like a chord, or if every single sound is an arpeggiator, you know, if you're just using the same sound and you have lots of channels of the same sound, it's going to sound muddy. You know, like that's just the nature of the beast. But if you have a diverse array of sounds and you just set the relative volumes next to each other, you're going to be able to make shit sound good without having too much knowledge of EQ and compression. And like I said at the beginning, on any mixing board, Ableton included, what's the first thing at the bottom of the fade or the bottom of the channel strip? It's the volume. That's the closest thing to the producer. That's the most important thing in a mix, is getting the relative volume levels right. Okay, cool. So I'm going to take a little break before the workshop, but the workshop starts in an hour and a half. If you want to sign up, hit thebreakthroughworkshop.com. That is our sign up link for these workshops that I do that are free. And if you want to get, there's this like kind of special, you know, class of 808 training package that I offer that there's only a few more of. If you want to get in on that, as opposed to just like doing the $100 a month training package, if you want to get like the class of 808 mega deal where you get all kinds of bonuses and shit, there's only so many of those left because I'm kind of like getting to the limits of my ability to physically accommodate that many students. So the Breakthrough Workshop is a prerequisite for that. So if you want to get in and get one of those spots, I'm probably only going to be offering that a few more times, and this is one of the last times. So the spots are almost all full. So get in there, get in the workshop, and I'll see you in like an hour and a half. Much love to everybody in the class of 808 and all of the people who download the weekly download. Thank you for supporting what I do. It's really fun teaching you guys. Keep asking questions, keep requesting more subjects, and I will keep teaching because it's fun and I like doing it. All right, lots of love. Can't wait to hear you come up with awesome new music. Peace.